Welcome everybody to the South Carolina Home Attainability Forum session on heirs property. This is the intro to heirs property problem and the potential solutions. This is our 6th session with the Home Attainability Forum, and for those of you that are joining us for the first time, this is our 6th session. It was started having these conversations in August of 2020, and we have several more that we'll tell you about that are scheduled for the next few months as well. But this particular session is one that we are very, very grateful to bring together before our housing and our community partners to discuss the situation, discuss these issues, and ways that we can look at rectifying the inequalities that exist in our state in particular. But I want to first start off by saying, doing a quick introduction and thank you to those who have made this session possible. And to begin with, first and foremost, we want to thank our sponsors, and that is Crescent Homes, Builders Incorporated, Great Southern Homes, Winter Twin Homes, and Mungo Construction. The collaborative partners that has allowed everybody to discuss these topics and have helped kind of guide this ship begin first and foremost with the South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus, Charleston County Planning, Charleston Home Builders Association, City of Columbia, Habitat for Humanity South Carolina, the Home Builders Association of South Carolina, Manufactured Housing of South Carolina, the Municipal Association of South Carolina Partner Association, the South Carolina Association of Community Action Partnerships, South Carolina Association of Counties, the South Carolina Chamber of Commerce, SC Housing, SC Landowners Association, Stevenson Adams and Associates, Town of Moncks Corner, and the University of South Carolina. All right, can everybody hear me? A couple nods. All right. Just a couple housekeeping items. If you are not speaking and you want to turn your video off, feel free to do so. We are recording this, so because we're not in a webinar mode, we are recording it, and you will be available for everyone to see if you have your video on. Likewise, if you are not speaking, we ask that you keep your audio turned off, keep yourself on mute. You can utilize the chat box. We'll be monitoring that. You can send individual messages to myself, Habitat South Carolina. I'll be your moderator today. I'm Nancy Lee with the state organization. But we'll be monitoring that to help out our speakers, to help them keep up. But otherwise, make sure your sound is turned off. And if you'd like to turn off your video, you may do so as well. All right. Sounds like we still have some background noise. There's a couple folks just want to make sure that they're on mute. That would be great. But let's go ahead. We're going to go ahead and get started. I want to just do a quick introduction and let you know that who is on with us today, who will be your presenters, and then I'm going to turn it over to Ram so we can get right into the content of our discussion. But first, from the Center for Heirs Property Preservation, we have Josh Walden. He is the Chief Operations Officer. We also have Dr. Jenny Stevens. She is the CEO of the organization. And the special guest that we have with us today is our State Senator Sen Scott, who I believe is on, and I'm actually going to hand it over to him to go ahead and kick us off today.
I think that was a clue for me to come on. Hello there. I think that was a clue for me to come on between trying to take another telephone call. I'm so delighted the committee has come together to talk about heirs property. Was I supposed to say something at this point? I missed your closing comments.
Yes, this is your time, sir.
I know there are a couple of groups who are talking about issues with heirs property. I do also know we put in the budget to be able to also convene a meeting to do that. And so this is not the budget, this is a meeting before that meeting, if I'm sure. And at some point, we're going to combine all of the meetings and the information so that we can really have some real detailed discussion. and all the research that we may need to do, we'll be able to use the in-house staff once we get everything kind of working together. But I'll take a look at how we structured what we put in the budget, and then we'll be able to come back and utilize what's ongoing, so we don't start all the way over and just kind of tie all of it together. I'm just so delighted to be on with you, and I'm really interested in learning all that I can, because I know there's a lot of folk here who have a lot of data to be able to share. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator Scott. We appreciate you being here. The next person I'm going to introduce you to is Dr. Jenny Stevens. She is the CEO with the Center for Heirs Property Preservation.
Sorry, an email came over. You know how you can turn off the volume for many things, but you can't turn off the volume for your computer, then you can't hear folks. So I apologize for that. Good afternoon. I am Jenny Stevens, and I have the pleasure of being the Chief Executive Officer here at the Center for Heirs Property Preservation. The center is a 501c3 organization that was created in 2005. Prior to that, we were a project of Coastal Community Foundation in Charleston, South Carolina. And we ran as a project from 2002 to the beginning of 2005. And the focus of the project was on awareness, outreach, and legal education, and primarily in a 3-county region around Charleston. So I want to say today I represent the hors d'oeuvres of this particular presentation, and Attorney Walden will be providing you with the entree. So I'm going to be bigger picture, and he'll give you all of the meaty details that I'm sure you guys want to hear specifically about the issue of heirs property. So when we started out in 2005, we only served 4 counties, but today we serve 22 of the state's 46 counties. And basically, if you start out on the coast and you move inland, we're in the PD region, and we haven't touched Richland County, but we're pretty much almost there. And that's part of our next plan. Our strategic plan, which we did like 2.5 years ago prior to COVID, we want to serve at least 2/3 of the state by the end of 2022. So we are progressing there and hope that we can do that. The center provides 3 buckets of work. That's how I like to, well, first of all, our mission is about protecting heirs property and promoting the sustainable use of land. Attorney Walden will give you the more formal definition of heirs property, but for the layperson's perspective, basically, heirs property is land that has come about as a result of someone dying without a will or their loved ones probating their estate within the 10 years allotted by state law. And so what we're doing here at the center is we're making sure we're providing the tools for those families to be able to, first of all, become knowledgeable about what it means to own heirs property, how to resolve it, and if it's of at least 10 acres or greater, how they could tap into sustainable forestry as a tool to generate some money. So having said that, we fulfill our mission by doing 3 buckets of work: prevention, resolution, and land utilization. Prevention in the sense of preventing the growth and the loss of heirs property. Resolution is exactly what it says, resolving it. And the land utilization, how do we help families understand the options of what they could possibly do for their land? Ultimately, it is about getting families to recognize what they own, providing them with the tools, because the tools here at the center are primarily their law and the sustainable forestry, so that families can begin to generate income that hopefully will become it will help build generational wealth. So in the prevention bucket, here are the activities that take place. Primarily, it's about education. We want landowners to make informed decision. And actually, if you were to have the picture, you would see that education is basically our foundation, because no matter which bucket you're in, we want you to be informed so that you can make decisions for yourself. So there is a component that we call a seminar. And basically, initially it was just the lawyers providing legal education, but now it's the combination of the legal education and education about sustainable forestry. Folk may not know, but forestry itself is a $21 billion industry in the state. So literally, we have people who may be sitting on what could an asset that could be used to help them move out of poverty. But because they don't have the tools, that land is lying dormant. So basically, they're working for the land rather than the land working for them. So the seminar, then we draft wills, because that's another way to reduce the number of people who have access to the land, or to make sure heirs property doesn't result. So we draft wills in two ways. People can either come into our office, or we have what we call our wills clinics, where our attorneys, and we actually have, Josh, correct me if I'm wrong, we currently have 6 attorneys on staff. And so those attorneys are going out in the communities along with some for-profit attorneys, and the wills clinics, people sign up in advance. They get an hour slot. We send them a questionnaire in advance so they can think about it, because we know that's the challenge. You know, who am I going to leave? What am I going to leave to whom? So they get to think about it in advance. And then when they come, or I should say prior to COVID, literally they would come and during that hour's time, hash it out. But now we do it over the phone, and then they come and sign up they sign the will on that day. We now call them drive-through wills. I happened to accidentally call them drive-by wills one time, which they told me don't say that because it's not, didn't sound good. So we have drive-through wills, a wills clinic. So, and then last but not least, if land is the major asset of the deceased individual, we will help their loved ones probate their estate. So that is the prevention bucket. The education, the seminars, drafting of wills, and probate. So that's the prevention. Then the resolution is move past that 10-year opportunity. 2 key things that are needed to resolve heirs property. One is knowing the family tree, or the descendants of the individual or heirs, that's the appropriate term, the heirs of the individual whose name is on the deed. Sometimes that is hard because we've had cases, and correct me if I'm wrong, Attorney Walden, that may have gone back to the early 1900s. So can you imagine how many generations that you've got to identify? But trust me, we don't have as many of those as they're more, I guess, around the 1970s or, that age, where it makes it a little more easier for us to resolve them. So I said, knowing the heirs, and the second thing is having agreement among your family. And we all know how easy that is, right? If you think of your own family, think about how easy that could be. So we've created a tool we call the family presentation. It's basically that educational seminar that I mentioned under the prevention bucket with mediation thrown in. Because 9 times out of 10, if there's an issue with the resolving the title, it has nothing to do with the land. It has to do with family dynamics that were never addressed. And until you address those family dynamics, you're never going to get to talk about the land. And then after that point, and I want it to sound like it's so easy, because it's not on occasion. Then the attorneys can really basically fill in the blanks and get the information that they need so that they can file the actual complaint. Then last but not least, the land utilization bucket. Primarily for us, that's sustainable forestry, but we're also incorporating agroforestry, which is a combination of traditional ag and forestry. As I mentioned earlier, forestry is a $21 billion industry. Oftentimes people of color don't have the resources to tap into that community. So since 2013, and this was at the request of one of our funders, they wanted to focus on African Americans and helping African Americans, because they saw that not only were people losing their land because of heirs property, but because they just didn't have the right connections. And one of them too was because USDA, as we know in the past, they haven't always treated people of color in the right manner. So basically, we've kind of put together a system. We have 5 foresters on our team. So we have the professional folk who can actually deliver the services to the landowners, and that makes it important. Primarily, education is key. We have education, we have technical assistance under this particular bucket. We also help our landowners access USDA programs so that they can implement their conservation programs that are in their forest management plan, and connect them with markets. So long story short, that was my elevator speech. Just want to give you an overview of what we do here at the center. Our goal, and if you go to our website, or I can call all the counties' names out if you want me to list all 22, because I can. So, and I will, well, I'll read them because I put them in alphabetical order so I don't forget them. So we're currently working in Allendale, Bamberg, Beaufort, Berkeley, Calhoun, Charleston, Clarendon, Colleton, Darlington, Dillon, Dorchester, Florence, Georgetown, Hampton, Horry, Jasper, Lee, Marion, Marlborough, Orangeburg, Sumter, and Williamsburg. Our main office is located in Charleston, but we have a satellite office in Orangeburg. And I will type our contact information in the chat so that you may access that. And if there are no questions for me, I'll turn it over to Attorney Walden.
I have a question, please.
Sure.
You said you're working in 26 county, and I noticed you mentioned Marlborough County. Is there a contact person? Because I live in Marlborough County, and I attended a workshop before, and I'm very much interested in making sure that I work to help get this information to individuals, because we've had a lot of deaths in Marlborough County, and a lot of people have died without a will. And that's one goal I want to try to make sure that people understand with workshops, how important it is to develop a simple will.
Okay, so what I'm going to do when I put our contact information, you can always call that number, and then our receptionist will connect you with the right person based upon your particular county. Okay. Thank you. You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dr. Stevens, for that overview. Josh Walden, we're going to turn it over to you now.
All right, thank you. Well, generally speaking, our Heirs Property seminars take anywhere from an hour to hour and a half, so I'm not going to get too in depth in regards to the particular law. Looking at the registrants list, I would imagine a lot of you have encountered Heirs Property through your work, and what I really wanted to touch on in the brief period of time, but I think we're going to go to a question and answer session at 1:45, is this. We all know that one of the primary issues related to Heirs Property is the fact that the status of ownership is up in the air. There's unclean title. So anytime you're going to utilize the property in any form or fashion, at least in a way that historically most people can use their home or land in regards to leverage or collateralization or anything along that lines, the Heirs Property issue becomes a real problem. Simply put, there is no public record establishing who the current owners are. Generally speaking, most of our clients, and most of our clients are comprised of folks who own less than 5 acres. We have a lot of folks who are involved with the forestry component of the work and the land utilization component, but the majority of folks are coming to us to help resolve home ownership, individual lots and that sort of thing. So we're experienced in that regard, and we see that as much as we do with multiple generational Heirs Property and large acreage amounts in rural areas. This isn't only a rural problem, it's an urban problem. So at the end of the day, if someone has a home and there is no legal record of who the current owner is, there are a myriad of reasons that that's going to cause a problem. And in a lot of ways, that's going to touch that heir. One of the primary reasons, or one of the primary problems, is just with Elsa or with Hugo or any of the various storms that we have roll through here on a yearly basis. I think we've had a couple of 100-year floods over the last 5 years. And what we see generally are folks who have heirs property, and just about the time the family or the heirs are recovering from one event, another one comes along. And very often they're working from a point of disadvantage because they're not going to qualify for home rehabilitation, disaster relief under the auspices of FEMA. Very often they're going to require certain documentation as far as ownership that for the most part heirs property owners can't provide. And that's not only on a federal level, it's also on a state and county level. We partner with a lot of folks who have rehabilitation dollars to provide to homeowners, and they have to send them here first so we can attempt to resolve the heirs property problem. So it's extremely detrimental in regards to disaster relief and any kind of home rehabilitation. Additionally, a lot of us that own homes, we know that if there's any equity in our home, we can certainly leverage that for purposes of a home improvement loan. We can leverage it for purposes of just whatever we may need. Again, absent clear title, the banks are not going to lend money using the property as collateral. Title insurance companies are certainly not going to issue title insurance policies, or they might, but the exceptions will be prohibitive. And in that end, you're sort of what amounts to the true the benefits of home ownership are locked away. They're unattainable for homeowners. Another problem primarily with heirs property and when you're dealing with home ownership is the other areas or that family dynamic that Jenny mentioned earlier plays a role oftentimes in land laws or home laws. Very often you might have one or two heirs living in the family home. That home may be owned by 10 to 12 people, and some of those people are comprised of folks who are not blood related based on when folks have passed away in the law of intestacy and how those fractional interests have trickled down over time. We get into that in a lot more detail at our actual heirs property seminar, but obviously when someone passes away, absent a will, their ownership fractional interest will be further divided under the law of this intestacy law under the probate code. So over time, that group only grows, and that's a group of tenant in common owners who each have an undivided right and right to usage in the whole. So if you have 15 people as heirs to a home, and the land it's sitting on, they each have an undivided right to use. Doesn't matter who's paying the taxes, doesn't matter who's been living there longer, doesn't matter what mama or dad or grandpa or grandma said before they passed away. At the end of the day, those folks are locked together. And again, that comes into play in regards to there being no clear public record of who the ownership is. I suppose to a certain extent, it's important to understand how ownership is tracked for home or land in South Carolina. As you may know, any deed that transfer an interest, whether that's a deed for sale or a deed by gift of a home, is recorded in the county RMC's office where the property is located. Over the course of time, every time a deed is recorded, that a subsequent deed is recorded in the same RMC's office. Anytime someone wants to be able to confirm who the owners are, they should be able to go to the RMC's office and track ownership over a period of time. That's what constitutes the chain of title. And if someone passes away owning that property, the probate court record should indicate who inherited or who was willed the property in that state administration. So there should be a continuous chain from owner to owner via deed. If one of those owners happens to pass away, if their estate was properly administered, whether they had a will or not, there's going to be a record in the probate court that continues that line of ownership. To use the property in any real way for purpose of collateral, engaging a bank, engaging anyone that's going to use the property or wants to use the property as a form of collateral, that's going to have to be established. Part of the legal services we provide are establishing that record via quiet title action or petition to determine heirs action, or as Jenny mentioned, on the front end, the best way, the preventative mechanism, is to administer the estate inside the 10 years allotted under South Carolina law, thereby avoiding that post 10-year issue that's going to require more complex, more costly, and more often than not, a more complicated process, because as time goes by and that heir group grows, generally you're going to have folks who have inherited who may not be blood heirs. Example being if I were to pass away and I didn't have a will and my wife inherited half interest in the property that I inherited from my father, she gets remarried and she passes away, that second husband is going to inherit an interest in that family land. You can imagine how that works over a couple of generations and what that does to the dynamic, because that person would have just as much right to use and ownership as any of the blood heirs. So the sooner you engage the issue and try to rectify it, you better prevent it by way of having an estate plan or succession plan in place. Another aspect and another problem associated with heirs property is land loss by way of forced sales amongst those tenant in common owners. Any of those tenant in common heirs can bring a forced partition sale against the other heirs and attempt to have the property sold and the money allocated in accord with respective fractional interest of each owner, which more often than not, it benefits everyone but the heirs. And at the end of the day, that's one form of land loss. Another is just sort of the despair that comes over a family when they've been dealing with this issue for a number of years, and you might have one or two people living in the home, and over the course of time, they can't get the issues resolved, and they may very well be facing some other pressures as far as gentrification, tax assessments going up around them, the taxes skyrocketing, and then just being unable to continue to pay the taxes, and oftentimes heirs property, land and homes can be lost at tax sale. So again, these sort of things all come into play when you're talking about heirs property. So every benefit that's available to an owner when they own a home is generally unavailable, other than being able to live there without a great deal of security, but with some security because you are an heir owner, aren't available to heirs property homeowners. Now there was a question in regards to sort of what's been done about heirs property from a federal standpoint over the last 10 years or so. And certainly Dr. Stevens can jump in on this if she likes. But I can tell you the 2018 Farm Bill addresses heirs property in the resolution thereof, or title resolution at heirs property, and also addressed the Uniform Heirs Property Partition Act, which South Carolina has already adopted. But for the most part, that bill is speaking to agricultural and forestry lands. It's not speaking to home ownership. It's not speaking to that sort of security. And most of the bills I've seen, there's one, the Rural Forest Markets Act, that's currently being addressed and their comments are being taken. Again, that's talking about carbon markets and that sort of thing. So sort of a more rural take on the issue. Now, I know the COVID relief bill, there is a mortgage relief component to that, and there is a title clearing aspect to that. The only question I would have is generally, if you're dealing with a mortgage, you're not dealing with heirs property, just because you're not going to go into that. You're not going to generally be able to secure a mortgage if you have heirs property, unless it's some sort of fourth, fifth tier, fly-by-night local lender kind of thing, and or private individual. And generally, I'd question the motives of anybody who would provide a mortgage on heirs property personally. So in that regard, there's not a whole lot of history that immediately comes to my mind for purposes of the last 10 years as far as heirs property. Jenny, did you want to add anything to that?
I think you said it very, very well, but it's just been recently that heirs property has been receiving national attention. Right. And part of it is because of the Uniform Partition Heirs Property Act. And I know Senator Scott has has proposed a bill earlier this year to address it at the state level. And I think his will probably focus more on housing, but at the national level, the focus has not been on housing. It has been most from the farmer perspective.
I want to, if you don't mind, I want to kind of jump in and make just a few comments. I apologize, Nancy, coming in not quite ready to take off, leaving another meeting, come this meeting. One of the main thing I do want to concentrate, and I appreciate that remark, and mine is focused more on the home ownership and rental. And what we're watching is in the rural counties of South Carolina, loss in population. Although the state is continuing to grow, we moved from 4.68 million people, 5,118,000 plus or minus, depending upon what the census data say. So that means that rural families are moving into urban centers. And that means that rural property, in terms of heirs properties, those issues still go unaddressed. What we have also done, we're working with historical black colleges, and all these schools have been rebranded. But I think the one you want to pay the closest attention to is going to be Voorhees College. And Voorhees College is going to be called the Institute of Rural Community Development, which will be a good central location to look at issues dealing with the rural communities and how we address those issues, especially with property distribution, developing communities so people are interested in coming back in these communities, building businesses as well as developing property. One of the main issues when you look at young people who will consider moving in rural counties, especially teachers, the biggest issue is trying to find a place to stay. And they can't build very much, as you said, heirs property creates a problem, especially trying to bring development and bring either federal financing to do infrastructure or even funds that the state may have. And so we're trying to address those kinds of issues. In a broader scale, the other HBCUs will have different issues that we'll be able to work through those processes. With an example, South Carolina State College will be doing business, environment, communication, transportation. All that is basically with broadband, transportation, environmental issues with water, and all these things affect what's going to happen with that land in the event if we're able to even use the land. So as we address the heirs property, we also need to also be able to move a step forward to make sure those families are able to enjoy those properties in a healthy environment way and be able to develop those properties so either other family members can use them or the other community at large can use them. As I indicated when I came on earlier, we weren't sure whether or not, and we went after trying to look at and begin a long discussion on the heirs property. No quick fix, because it's going to take some time to address what Jenny and have been doing in the center for a long time, is finding different solutions to different problems as it relates to different families. The real question is, has the state done its part in terms of providing financial assistance, and providing training and environment so families can in fact become more involved in what's going on, and so they too can help us solve even some of the what we consider difficult problems become simpler problems if family members are willing to come to the table and even work through trying to do division of property, so that we remove the heirs property and become some property ownership. Also coming behind this is another study committee. I'll bring the business community in to look at other issues we need to do to address the housing shortage. Financing is not an issue right now. Rates are probably as low as they've been probably in 50, 60 years or even longer than probably like 60 years. And so as we tie all these issues together, is heirs property one of the major issues that the counties that Jenny talked about a minute ago? Most of those were basically rural counties that had little to no growth. Is that a major stumbling block in those counties? Can we provide some relief to families and so that some development can begin to take place in those counties? And those are some of the things that we want to continue to address. I thought it was better fit if we were working with an institution of higher education that got some young people in there who can also, I think, can assist us with bright idea and the right leadership coming from those who understand the profession. Keep in mind, a lot of these kids who come out of rural communities already are part of trying to solve the problem because their families who own these rural properties. So we'll try to look at it from a holistic approach and trying to figure out the best way to address the issue. The mortgage part, as you indicated, I mean, at some point, unless someone provided a a seller financing or something outside of the requirement for clear title, or in fact required to do any type of title search, and also to make sure the title was clear. What has that caused families problems down the road, because you can still have a cloud on the title even with heirs property. And so we'll try to address as many of these issues that we can. Also, as I stated earlier, we need to bring in some of our staff, because a little bit later on, as this committee, and Nancy, thank you again so much, as this committee could begin to progress on, I'm gonna just combine the study committee bill to it so we don't have to go back and start again. I think most of your names are probably was listed anyway on the study bill, never knowing how things are going to work over here, whether things will make it through that process or not. But we're open for new ideas and direction we need to go into. Whether or not, Jenny, we need to help provide some additional financing, training, information, but really pay some real close attention trying to address and solve some of the problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Scott. And Josh, I just saw you come off mute, so I'll turn it right back over to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that in the comment section, there was someone that indicated that a lot of the FAAs are leaning heavily towards mortgage assistance, but that the fund through that U.S. Trade or under that homeowners assistance fund, that it's to help prevent displacement, you know, so for home repairs. So maybe that's a shoehorn in that it's not necessarily mortgage based. So certainly that would be wonderful. And we can provide that service. We certainly do and would look forward to doing that. I know that we were going to have it, I think, what, at 1:45. Does anybody have a question that I could answer for them in regards to anything that I mentioned, or Jenny?
If somebody has a question, if you just want to come up, mute, and we'll, unless it gets a little too crazy, we'll just go that route for now.
Well, I just wanted to point out that our outreach liaison for, let's see, I saw it for, her name is Delissa Adams, and she posted her contact information. But what we can do after this is to also give you our outreach liaisons names for all of our counties, okay? And their contact info.
And we will be sending out a follow-up email with a link to this recording and the information that Dr. Stephens has put in the chat box. We'll send a list of those 22 counties, a way for you to sign up for the Center for Heirs Property newsletter, some different information to follow up. But if you have a question, you can either put it in the chat box or come off mute.
Archive in history, Josh, they played a major role in trying to help identify names of individuals who might be part of, on that chain of title, and trying to help either locate those other family members and trying to clear those titles. And also, has funding been made available for those who would have an interest to be able to do some of the title search work as you combine trying to do the tracking part to find these family members?
Yeah, generally that process of putting together the family tree involves engagement, securing evidence to the effect of who are the intestate heirs and what that group looks like for purposes of being sure everyone's notified and we have everybody at the table that needs to be at the table. The center, our clients, or we have funds that are made available to the center to assist clients in certain instances to pay for title searches. So we generally pay for all of our title searches associated with any work we do. Now it can be difficult in these times where the real estate market's sort of fast and furious, and for obvious reasons, an abstractor just common sense wise can make a lot more money working on these transactions than spending 4 days in the RMC's office on an heirs property issue when you might have 70 and 80 names that need to be searched, and obviously it's cost prohibitive. But we do all right in that regard. But we pay for our title searches. So we do, our clients do not pay attorney's fees. So generally Any costs associated with the process, the family will bear, or if we have funds available, we'll pay for it.
In the event if we begin to work with the Institute at Voorhees, what type of assistance in working with some of the students and faculty after we do some training than they do when you get on these large searches, like you say, 6 or 7 family members, and take some of that stuff on as a project for the school? Of course, somebody check it behind to make sure they do it right. Can also provide some assistance to try to solve some of the larger cases that may have been out there for a while.
Yeah, I mean, certainly anytime we can engage a group of young folks who are interested in volunteering and assisting, we would certainly take advantage of that. I can tell you more often than not, a lot of the issues that crop up in a case that's over the course of time, certainly issues of finding and confirming the family tree are a challenge, depending on how many heirs you have. But a lot of times it's the family dynamic component, the mediation of agreement, because the center has certain requirements that other for-profit attorneys or private attorneys may not have. And one of them is we're going to require an agreement amongst all the heirs, or we're not going to file a quiet title action. Otherwise, we'll be placing the client in a very vulnerable position in front of a master in equity and opening them up to a forced partition sale by someone who may only answer pro se and not have to hire an attorney to initiate a forced sale. So one of the reasons we can say that we've never been involved, knock on wood, to this point with a case where a family lost land under those circumstances is we generally require that mediated agreement. So that is an additional component to the work we do. But a vast majority of our cases, as Jenny suggested, are within 30 to 50 years. And, we're not talking about 1900 or 1880. I've got a couple of cases that are going into their 6th and 7th year. But the majority of our cases involve a lot shorter duration period of time. And, but that's not to say we couldn't utilize folks, because oftentimes our folks are older, maybe not as tech savvy, maybe not as comfortable on the internet, trying to locate, something on ancestry.com or some of the free search engines out there. So that kind of assistance could be leveraged to more success or quicker success, at the very least.
And Josh, we're getting a couple questions in the chat box, and I know if you were submitted in advance of this, that you kind of give us a snapshot of what is entailed as a family. What do they have to, how long does it take if they're looking to clear their titles? What do they have to do? How do they go about finding folks who do they find out who their family members are? How long does it take?
Sure. Yeah. And it can vary a great deal depending on the facts. The devil's always in the details, So when someone's sitting across from one of the staff attorneys and you start sort of rolling out the family tree, which is step one, anyone that lives in or anyone that has an interest in land in South Carolina, even if it's not in our 22 county service area, can call the center and request an intake, a free consultation with a staff attorney regarding the heirs property issue or state issue. Now, to be accepted, there are certain parameters, income-wise, and being within our group and being a South Carolina resident. But as long as it's South Carolina property, you can generally get a free consultation with an attorney. So for purposes of that journey, beginning from stage one, from the intake through the end course, it can depend a lot. If it's just a matter of someone having passed away within 10 years and they need an estate administration, generally speaking, that's something that can happen relatively quickly. And when I say relatively quickly, I mean 6 months to 12 months, that sort of range, depending on the size of the family, folks getting on board in a timely fashion, that sort of thing. And it can go, and first and foremost, no matter what kind of case we're dealing with, we have to establish that family tree first and finding those heirs. Now, when we get to a situation where there's some parts of the family tree that folks, I don't talk to that side of the family, I don't even know those folks, which happens relatively consistently. So at that point, generally as the family tree is created, it's almost a conversation between the attorney and the client. The attorney sits with it, the attorney creates that initial family tree, sends that tree to the family, and very often that's the client, and then the associated family members are assisting that client. And there's a series of questions. As those questions are answered, that family tree is updated and sent out again. If folks run into a problem, one of the things we found out, and I've been with the center for about 11 years now. One of the things I found out is sometimes people don't want to find folks because they don't want to find them, not because they can't be found. So sometimes when they realize that we've got to find these folks in order for us to move forward, because again, we're going to require a mediated agreement. And it's not always purposeful. Sometimes you're dealing with someone who might be 75 or older. They don't live in the world of social media. They don't live in that world. They get some younger folks involved, and then it's funny how many people you can find on Facebook and that sort of thing. And so that is a long process. As I stated earlier, once that family tree is established, depending on if there's a family dynamic problem, in other words, a disagreement on some level regarding the property, that has to be resolved. So we've got cases where the family tree is relatively resolved in a short period of time, but the family dynamic might drag on for a period of time. And then people may pass away during the course of the case. And then other folks have to be re-engaged and brought into, even if there's an existing agreement. So it can be a difficult process. And sometimes the any combination thereof that you can imagine we've seen come through the doors. But I will tell folks this, do not let that dissuade you or anyone you know from calling the center and engaging the services, because I can tell you just from my perspective in the cases I've handled, I can't recall a case that came in that everyone was on the same page. There's always some degree of it. Now, some are more severe than others. You know, we've got to meet some folks in one church on one Saturday and some folks in another church on another Saturday, because they don't want to meet in the same church together. So that you have that, then you have just folks not feeling comfortable. So I will say this: the center's attorneys here, they consider that a part of the process, which is, I think, differentiates us and them in particular from private attorneys, because private attorneys don't have that luxury. They've got to charge for that time, and it's just not cost effective. Part of the center's services is that family presentation, family mediation dynamic, and thinking outside the box and trying to find the best way to the end goal. And we're in it generally for the long haul. You know, we understand it's going to take some time, but you know, after you find that family tree, getting everybody on the same page. If it's just a home, you know, very often there may be a decision that, you know, there's 12 owners, but only 2 people live there, or one person lives there who's been paying the taxes, and the rest of them want to transfer their interest to that individual. We can accommodate that by whatever legal process that clears the title, along with deeds that transfer that interest and consolidate it into one individual. So that's, when we're dealing with homes, that's very often the case, you know, and with homes, the disagreement can come down to, well, you pay the taxes because you live there. That's why you pay the taxes, even though we all own it. So it's just a case by case basis as far as how long it's going to take and what that looks like. There's no time frame. There was a question in the chat log that basically asked, how long do you look for heirs? And for our purposes, if we're looking at a quiet title action, the thing the court's going to have you do is show due diligence trying to locate someone. And the center is going to require that due diligence, because what we tell folks is someone else could be sitting in front of us and you could be somewhere and someone's claiming they don't know where you are, you know. So the truth of the matter is, we respect everyone's interest that's in that heir group. So that obviously requires due diligence, not only the family's part, as well as our part. Now, at a certain point, if you can't find someone, and on occasion that does happen, and I've had cases where after due diligence and publication, an affidavit to the court that we can't locate a particular individual, it's generally not as if that person's interest disappears. It's still there. You just provided to the court that you cannot find them after a due diligence search. And then generally you're going to want a partition by allotment where the heirs can buy out that heir's interest. So it's not as if people disappear, generally speaking. It's a process whereby once someone can't be found, petition the court to allow that person's interest to be purchased. That money goes into the court coffers, and you know, eventually, more likely than not, becomes, unless someone comes forward and claims it based on publication, become part of lost property with Secretary of State's office and something along that line. But you generally, you know, I can't find them isn't the answer we accept initially. So we generally have to go from there.
Thank you. One question, another question that arose is, will bank loans or what resources are available for heirs properties families who are, to prevent families who can't pay their taxes from that property going to a sheriff's sale?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the ways families lose heirs property, whether it's some, rural tract that has nothing on it or has the family home on it, or whether it's an in-town or, urban setting, where you just have a house, or neighborhood setting or suburbs. And if it gets lost to tax sale, that can be tricky depending on what county you're in, because a lot of the counties are now interpreting the right to redeem process strictly, and they're saying that you have to be an owner to redeem, and if you can't prove ownership, they're not allowing you to redeem it, even though they've been collecting taxes from the same individual for the last 20 years, and the same individual comes forward and wants to redeem the property, and they're told they can't unless they can resolve ownership and prove ownership within that year's redemption period. And as we've talked about, that's a tough row to hoe. You're generally not going to resolve the ownership issues inside a year. And that also speaks to a common myth that I hear oftentimes, that, well, I'll let the property go to tax sale and I'll go buy it at the tax sale and I'll get a tax deed and therefore my title's claimed, which is not the case. And as a title insurance agent for a long time doing a lot of transaction work, generally, if there was a tax deed in the chain of title, you had to bring a quiet title action anyway. And not to mention maybe try to get some quick claim deeds from those owners if you can determine who those owners under that. But there's property; it's a whole different ball game. So the tax sale problem is a real one, and losing the property tax sale. And again, the idea of condemnation as well. As properties are affected by disasters, and people are living in homes that maybe don't have running water, or they've got sort of they've got the electricity rigged in a way that there's electricity, but certainly not up to code. Extremely dangerous. Not only that, but problematic as far as the county or the county's concerned. And sometimes folks find themselves in a situation where they have to do major repairs in order to keep the property from being condemned and shut down.
So Josh, I want to go back to a minute ago. You talked about, I've got an interest in the property. And so maybe the sister brother who was paying the property tax is now deceased. So I go in to try to pay it. And you got counters that saying that they cannot pay it?
Not necessarily in that scenario.
Okay.
Once the property goes to tax sale,
Right.
the right to redeem is being challenged. Generally, I've not heard of any county tax assessor's office denying someone the right to pay the taxes if they're up to date or they're being paid within the allotted time.
Well, let's go back to the property, the taxes that are being redeemed 2 or 3 years and right before the point the property is going to be sold. I do have an interest in the property. You're saying there is a problem out there that counties are not allowing a person with an interest in the property because it's heirs property to be able to redeem?
Well, some counties are saying if a property is going to tax sale, right, and it's been sold, and then you have that year's period to redeem, right?
Right.
If it's heirs property, they're saying you can't redeem because we don't know if you are an heir, which is technically the truth, because until a court establishes who the owners are, you don't know who the owners are, or the public record, right? So they're denying certain folks, or they're denying those folks the ability to redeem property taxes. Now, I don't know how widespread that is. I know Dorchester County follows that rule.
Well, we need to visit that because that person does have an interest in that property, and we need to be clear in the law what can be done and presented to the treasurer at the time of redemption, so the person can get the property back, because they could be in the middle of a 5-6 year of clearing the title.
And I think, and not to cut you off, but I think if somebody were able to bring a pleading that had been filed, that might satiate the county. But what happens is our folks who have been paying the taxes forever, and in some families, that's the process. That extra year allows them more time to collect money to pay the taxes. and it was always utilized as such. And they don't have nothing to bring. They haven't filed any kind of action. They don't have a deed other than the name of the deed in the name of the decedent owner, who might be a father or parent or grandparent or great grandparent in some instances, and that doesn't suffice. And there have been a couple of court actions in regards to challenging that, particularly in Dorchester County, and the county has won on both of those. So it may be a legislative approach that's
Correct. I was going to say that maybe it's time for the law itself to indicate what documents can be bought before that particular county in order for me to catch up the back taxes. It still didn't clear the property. It's still heirs property.
Sure.
And to be able to gain someone else's property who is a legal owner, to me, it's just not right. So we'll take a look at trying to file something that says that gives the owner the opportunity to present certain documents. So those documents can be certified, reviewed, or what the law says can be presented to try to save the property.
Or even the history, if it's an heir, the same individual as an heir identified as the granddaughter, whether it be a self-proving affidavit or something like that, coupled with the history of paying the taxes that way for the last 20 years, would be something that could be
so if you can,
for their sake. But I could definitely, the attorney who handled those cases against Dorchester County is a former board member, so I could certainly get with that attorney and maybe we could have some sort of discussion in that regard.
let's do that, and so that we can put something together that make good sense, because in many cases, family members may not have been notified to the last minute because I've been living on the property forever, but I passed away. And now other family members notify me that I have an interest in the property. I don't live here, and I desire to come and try to help clear it up so we can divide the property up and everybody get their interest. So if y'all let me know when you want to meet, or provide me some kind of document. We've got all the way to January to try to get something filed and get something in place. What I want to do is collect a number of different things that solve a number of different problems that we have out there. And also ongoing as we finish getting these HBCUs in place with these institutes, allow them also to help us in gathering information to help try to solve some of these problems that have just been sitting out there. Thank you so much, Josh.
Thank you, Senator Scott, and Josh Walden and Dr. Stevens for your time today. I know that there is a lot more information, a lot more questions that folks have. I put my email address in the chat box. It is nancy@southcarolinahabitat.org. If you want to send me the questions, we'll wait to send that follow-up email a day or so to see how many more of those questions that we can answer, but we'll send a follow-up message to all folks who have registered for the session. So you have the link to the center, you can sign up the newsletter, you know who to call if you're wanting to get a hold of the center and talk about property in question. And we'll make sure that you are able to stay connected. I do want to take just a quick minute and let everyone know that we don't have the dates, but we have the information for 4 more sessions on the horizon. In August, we will be speaking with the Bankers Association for our 7th session. September will be case ed. We'll be talking about the impacts of residential instability and substandard housing, and very much like today, policies, partnerships, funding, what's needed to move the ball forward for increased affordable housing stock in South Carolina. And then in October, we'll be talking about discriminatory practices in housing, such as zoning, impact fees, and density issues. And then in November, I think I saw a on here that we'll be having talking about the role manufactured housing has in home attainability here in South Carolina. So be sure that you're keeping an eye on most of the partners on here. Where I know we're all pushing on our social media sites, but it's SouthCarolinaHousingForum.com. But you can look on Homebuilders Association of South Carolina. They're one of the key leads that put this committee together. Habitat South Carolina, we certainly have information on our site as well for those future dates. And like I said, thank you to Senator Sen Scott, Josh Walden, and to Dr. Stevens for your time today. Folks, be sure to to reach out with any questions you have. We'll compile those, and we will be sending out a link to this recording as well after the session. Thank you so much.